I never imagined that a clogged kitchen drain could turn into the most quiet and profound evening of my life. The late afternoon sun was cutting long, golden rectangles across the linoleum, and the air held the faint, sweet smell of the apple crisp-eyed baked that morning, now cooling on the counter. The house was filled with that particular kind of stillness that only comes after decades within the same walls. It was a silence I was used to, a silence I had come to manage. But on that day, the quiet was about to be broken, and the stillness was about to shift on its axis, though I didn't know it yet. What happened next wasn't loud or dramatic. It was something far more lasting. I was 72 then, a widow for 9 years. My days had settled into a gentle, predictable rhythm that I both cherished and, if I was honest with myself, sometimes found a little too roomy. Mornings were for tea and the crossword, afternoons for a walk or tending to the small garden my husband, Robert, had loved so much. The evenings were the longest stretch, filled with the murmur of the television and the occasional creak of the floorboards, sounds that seemed to measure the emptiness. The drain had been slow for days, a stubborn gurgle that refused to clear. I tried the usual remedies, but it held fast. A small frustration, but a necessary one to solve. I found the number for a local handyman service tucked in a drawer, a relic from when Robert was here to handle such things. My hand hovered over the phone for a moment, a familiar flutter of reluctance at inviting a stranger into my space. But the quiet necessity won out. I made the call. He arrived an hour later, just as the sun was beginning to dip below the rooftops. I opened the door to a man who looked to be in his late 50s, perhaps early 60s. He had a calm, unhurried way about him, carrying his worn canvas tool bag not like a burden, but like an extension of his arm. His movements were deliberate, his voice soft when he introduced himself as Thomas. He had kind eyes, the kind that held a gentle, patient light, and when he stepped inside, he didn't fill the space with noise or energy, but with a quiet, attentive presence. I showed him to the kitchen sink, the late light catching the stainless steel. As he knelt to look under the cabinet, I noticed something I hadn't expected. His hands, though calloused from work, moved with an unusual tenderness as he arranged his tools. The sound of the cabinet door opening, the clink of metal, a soft, focused sigh. These were the new sounds in my kitchen. I should have moved to the living room, given him space, but I found myself lingering. I busied myself, putting the kettle on for tea, a small, familiar ritual that suddenly felt different with someone else in the room. The gentle scrape of a wrench, the quiet thud of a pipe being loosened. The room, which had felt so spacious moments before, now seemed to hold us both in a smaller, more intimate circle. I wiped down an already clean counter, straightened a stack of mail. I was acutely aware of the rhythm of his breathing, a steady, quiet presence just a few feet away. The loneliness of the house seemed to recede, not gone, but held at bay by this simple, shared occupation of space. He worked patiently for several minutes, the task requiring pauses to check the flow, to test the seal. During one of these lulls, the silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. He glanced up, his gaze taking in the small kitchen, the window box of herbs outside. "You keep a lovely home," he said, his voice low. "It has a peaceful feeling." "Thank you," I replied, a little surprised by the observation. It was my husband's pride. The garden especially. "I can see that," he nodded, looking back at the pipes. "Sometimes things just get blocked up. Doesn't mean the whole system is broken. Just needs a little careful attention." His words hung in the air, practical about the drain, but they settled somewhere deeper inside me. I paused, my hand frozen on the teacup. He wasn't just talking about plumbing. If on cue, a soft rumble of thunder sounded in the distance, and then the gentle, insistent patter of rain began to tap against the kitchen window. Thomas glanced out, then back at the now-flowing drain. "Well, that's that part done," he said, but he made no immediate move to pack his tools. He noticed the slight drip from the faucet above, a minor nuisance I'd learned to ignore. "Mind if I take a look at that while I'm here? Save you another call." I found myself nodding, a quiet gratitude warming my chest. "Please." And the rain's picking up. Would you like a cup of tea? I just put the kettle on. He accepted with a simple, grateful nod. We sat at the small kitchen table, the rain creating a soft, gray curtain at the window, 2 mugs warming our hands. Time seemed to both stretch and compress. The ordinary evening outside felt a world away. The tea and the steady drumming of the rain loosened something. We talked of small things first, the unusually warm autumn, the old oak tree in the yard. Then he asked, gently, if I had lived here long. All my adult life, I said. It's just me now, though. For some years. He listened, not with pity, but with a quiet understanding. I know that quiet, he said after a moment. My wife passed 8 years ago. The kids are grown, scattered. My work keeps me moving, but the evenings he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. We spoke of the gaps left behind, not the dramatic absences, but the small, profound ones, the second teacup left unused, the silence where another's breathing used to be, the profound loneliness of being unseen in your own home. It was a recognition of loneliness meeting loneliness, not to merge, but to acknowledge its shared shape. The rain began to lessen, the light outside shifting from gray to a deep, watery blue. Dusk was settling in. We had finished our tea. He had repaired the faucet with a quiet efficiency. The practical reason for his being there was gone. He stood, slowly, and began to gather his tools. He moved to the sink to test his work one final time, and as he turned back, his hand, still warm from the teacup, gently found mine. It wasn't a lover's grasp, but a brief, firm, and knowing pressure. A quiet acknowledgement. It lasted only a moment, but in that touch, I felt a shock of profound recognition. It was the feeling of being truly seen, not as a widow, not as an elderly woman alone in a large house, but as a person, present and real in that quiet kitchen. He zipped his tool bag, the sound final. Should be good now, he said, his voice the same soft tone as when he arrived. If that drip comes back, you have my number. He hesitated, then added, I do odd jobs all over this part of town. It's a good way to see old neighborhoods. I walked him to the door. The rain had stopped, and the evening air smelled clean and damp. Perhaps you'll let me know how the garden fares next spring, he said, a statement that was also a question. I watched him walk down the path, his silhouette blending into the blue evening. I closed the door and leaned against it, the cool wood solid at my back. I looked at the kitchen sink, gleaming and silent. The drain was fixed, yes. But I understood, standing there in the restored quiet, that something else had been repaired, too. Some repairs go deeper than the wall they fix. They mend the quiet around a person's heart.